Hi everyone! Today's lesson is going to be an overview of operations with fractions. You will be able to simplify fractions today, add and subtract fractions, and multiply and divide fractions. So let's first talk about some keywords that we learned about before. Reciprocal. Reciprocal is a flipped fraction. So some examples would be 2/5, the reciprocal would be 5/2. Notice that they are not equal to each other. 5/2 is the reciprocal of 2/5. You just flip the fraction. Now, if you have a whole number, what you could do is you could make it a fraction by putting it over 1 and then flip it. So the reciprocal of 6 is 1/6. And we know inverse operations are the opposite operations. So the inverse of multiplication is division, and the opposite or inverse of division is multiplication. Listing out the multiples. Let's start by adding fractions. If you remember, we used the four-square model to help us keep our work organized. So first step is we write the problem, and the second step is to find the LCD. So I'm going to start by listing out the least common denominator, or listing out the multiples of the denominators. And I always start with the number, so 10, 20, 30, 40, and so on. And then 30, 60, 90, and so on. And you can see that the first multiple that they share is the least common multiple. So the LCD, which is really the least common denominator, is 30. Step 3, rewrite the problem and solve. So I need to make sure both denominators are 30, and 1/30 is already the way I want it to be. So I'm going to multiply 7/10 by 3, because 10 times 3 will give me the 30, and then whatever I do to the denominator, I must do to the numerator. So my first fraction becomes 21/30. 21/30 and 7/10 are equivalent. We didn't change the fraction because we multiplied it by 3 over 3, which is really just 1. So now I'm going to add those together. And you only add the numerators, and we keep the denominators. Step 4 is to simplify if possible. So since 22 over 33 is even, I know that I can reduce it. What number can I divide 22/30 by? If you said 2, you are correct. So 22 divided by 2 is 11, and 30 divided by 2 is 15. Therefore, we have simplified our first fraction to 11/15. Moving on to subtracting fractions. So we're going to start with a problem again. This time we have two mixed numbers. And for step 2, we're going to find the least common denominator. So I'm going to list out my multiples for 4. And I'm going to list out my multiples for 6. And you can see that they both have 24 in common, but the least common multiple would be 12. You can use 24, but sometimes it's a little bit easier to simplify when the denominator is the least common. So I'm going to stick with 12. So now we need to rewrite both of these fractions, and I know that to get a denominator of 12, I need to multiply 4 by 3. So I will also multiply the numerator by 3, so that would give me 4 and 9/12. And then to get the 6 to become a 12, I would multiply the denominator and the numerator by 2, which would give me 3 and 10/12. So we have just rewritten our fractions. Now, we cannot subtract 9 and 10 because 9 minus 10 would give us a negative number, and we haven't gotten there yet. So we learned how to regroup fractions when subtracting. So what we did is we borrowed a whole from the 4, so that becomes a 3, And we have to add whole back. But remember, because this is a fraction, the whole is not 1. The whole is whatever the denominator is. So it would be 9 plus 12. So if I rewrite this again, I get 3 and 21 over 12. And when I subtract, the 3's will cancel out, and 21 minus 10 is 11 over the denominator of 12. And I cannot simplify our answer, so that would be our final answer. Multiplying fractions. When we multiply or divide fractions, we do not need a common denominator. What we will do is multiply across and cross cancel. So number 1, 3/4 of 28. What does that mean? The key word here is of, and that tells us that we're going to be multiplying 3/4 times 28. And since it's a whole number, I will put it over 1 to make it a fraction. Now you could multiply 3 times 28, but you can also cross cancel here. So remember, to cross cancel, you look at either the numerator or denominator and see if there are any common factors. Since 4 is a common factor of 28 and 4, I'm going to divide 4 by 4 to get 1. 28 divided by 4 gives me 7. So I have simplified by cross-canceling. Now when I multiply straight across, 3 times 7 is 21, and 1 times 1 is 1. So 3/4 of 28 is 21. Example 2. Now we have a proper fraction times a mixed number. What we need to always do when multiplying is make our mixed numbers improper. And the way we do that is we multiply and add. 9 times 2 is 18, plus 3 gives us 21 over 9. So now we have 6/7 times 21 over 9. Now you can multiply straight across, but I see a good opportunity of cross-canceling here. So first, 7 and 21 have a common factor of 7. So 7 divided by 7 is 1. 21 divided by 7 is 3. Now 6 and 9 have a common factor of 3. So I'm going to divide them both by 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And 9 divided by 3 is 3. And just to make it a little cleaner, I'm going to rewrite the numbers that are left. And now when you multiply across, you would get 6 over 3, which can simplify to a whole number 2. Last up is dividing fractions. Just like with multiplying, common denominators are not needed, but this time, dividing, we use the inverse. We multiply by the reciprocal. So let's do example number 1. We're going to keep the 12, and I'm going to write it as a fraction, and instead of dividing by 2/5, that is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal 5/2. And again, I'm going to cross cancel. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 12 divided by 2 gives me 6. Multiplying straight across, I would get 30 over 1, or just 30. Example number 2, we have a mixed number here, so we need to make that improper first. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 4 would give us 9/5, divided by 3/7. I always like to rewrite my problem before I multiply by the reciprocal. So for my second step, we're going to keep 9/5 the same, then we multiply by the reciprocal of 3/7, which would be 7/3. Now I can't cross-cancel with the 7 and the 5, but 3 can divide evenly into 3 and 9. So 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 9 divided by 3 is 3. Multiplying across, we get 21 over 5. But if I wanted to write this improper fraction as a mixed number, I would say, how many times does 5 go into 21? Well, 5 times 4 is 20, plus 1 left over would give me the mixed number answer of 4 and 1/5. So now that you've watched this video, please make sure you answered all the questions in the Edpuzzle and proceed to the next step in your must-do chart. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day today.